Alex from Spellbound Weaving and Dyeing, and today is part 2 of our How to Dye Cotton Yarn series. So in the last episode I showed you everything that you're going to need to dye yarn and follow along with the tutorials on this channel. And today I'm going to be showing you how to take your yarn from the combs that you buy from the store, how to get it measured, how to get it clean, and how to get it soaked and ready to dye. So let's get started. There are a few different ways to get your yarn off your cone ready to dye and then eventually weave. One of those is by using a warping board or a warping mill. Today I'm going to be using the Sawyer Bee warping square. So I'll show you how I like to measure my yarn for my warp, but any of the above mentioned ways to measure your warp are going to work perfectly fine. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start measuring my cotton yarn into my warp chains to get them ready for dyeing. Now, if you have any questions about this part of the process or anything about the weaving side of things, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. I will be covering more of the weaving side of Spellbound weaving in some upcoming videos. So if you have any questions or if there's anything you want to know, please feel free to leave a comment. Now that we've measured some yarn, what we want to do is take it off the warping square, but we don't want it to tangle up. So one thing that's really important to learn is how to chain your warp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this out of the comb. I don't need to worry about a cross or anything for my weaving because we will be dyeing it and putting it onto the loom, so it's not really a big deal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it over my hand just like that, cross it, and pull the yarn through. It's just basically like a crochet chain stitch. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. I'm not a crocheter. So the reason that we're doing this is we don't want our yarn to tangle. There's nothing worse than knotty, wet yarn. And if you ask my husband, he would be mortified because he has helped me with many a tangled warp. And I'm talking long, like 20-meter warps tangled. Just a mess, a hot mess. So learn from my mistakes, chain your warps up before wetting and dyeing them. So you don't want to do this too tight because when you're scouring and soaking your yarn, you want the water to be able to totally penetrate the yarn. You don't want to have any dry spots. You don't want to have any spots where the soda ash hasn't completely penetrated the yarn. So what I'm doing is just a really loose chain stitch. You'll see it looks quite short. This warp is actually around, I think it's 5.5 yards, which is, where are my measurements? I think it's about 6 meters or so. So it's not a super long warp, but it's not very short. This is going to be some tea towels. So I'm weaving some tea towels for Spellbound weaving. So we've got our little chain here. This is only 2 inches, so it is quite a small section. I'll show you what I'm working on at the moment and what this is going to be turned into. We'll be doing the dye job for this yarn in the next video of the series. So I'm going to measure out some more warp chains and then I'll show you how to clean and scour your yarn. Alright, so I'm showing you now what I'm currently working on the loom. I'm using, this is the same cotton that I was measuring earlier, but you can see that I do have some dyed sections. Just some little stripes to add a little bit of interest, but they're not dyed in a solid way. They are dyed, the camera's having a little bit of trouble picking them up, but you can see that there's lots of variation in that colour. We've got some speckles, we've got some darker sections. We've got some cute little spots where the colour has broken. We have got some really interesting effects here. And my favourite thing about it is that it's quite random, you know? It's not repeating. The colours aren't repeating. There's speckles here and there's darker sections there. And we've got colours mixing. We've got colours blending and bleeding into each other. And I think it just gives it a really fun effect. Just stops things from being boring. So the yarn that I was measuring earlier is going to be the next piece from this collection. So we're going to follow along in the next video and I'm going to show you how to achieve this gorgeous dye job. And the great thing about it is that while it is very easy, it is very fun. So make sure you subscribe so that you can follow along when we take on that dye tutorial next time. Okay, so the next step after we have measured our yarn, we've got our measured yarn here, is we're going to scour it. And now scouring basically means we're just going to be cleaning off any dirts, any oils, any impurities basically on our yarn that are going to interfere with our dye job. So from the first episode, I've shown you that we're going to be using a textile detergent. This is called Synthropol detergent. You can buy it from Dharma Trading. If you don't want to buy the textile detergent, Blue Dawn or Fairy Dish Soap works perfectly for this. So you can do this in a bucket, you can do this in a bowl, whatever. I'm doing it in my kitchen sink today to show you just how much dirt is going to come off this nice white looking yarn. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the plug in. I'm going to start running some hot water, as hot as you can get it. I'm just going to put in a little drip. You don't really need much of this at all, and you really don't need much Blue Dawn or Fairy Dish Soap. So I'm literally just chucking my chains into the sink. Now you're not going to need much water. What I've done earlier is I boiled the kettle. Now obviously you're not going to be wanting to push this yarn down with your hands, but you can see that the yarn is just sucking up that water. Cotton isn't as aquaphobic as silk, for example. Silk can take a lot of work to really work that water into the yarn, but as you can see, this yarn is just absolutely sucking this water up. Now, one thing that I like to recommend is something like a wooden spoon. This one looks like it's been super dyed, but there's no actual dye coming off it, so you can just use this to make sure that you're pushing your yarn all the way in. You really want to get it nice and clean, so you can swish it around a bit, really get that water to penetrate. I'm going to put in just a little bit more. You can already see some of the dirt that is coming off this yarn. It's just outrageous. I was so shocked the first time I did this. And this is only about 6 inches of a warp that we are rinsing and dyeing today. So really, look at that. Look at all that dirt. Can you see how brown that water is? And this has only been in here for about a minute or so. It's pretty amazing just how dirty it is when it comes to you from the mill. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to push my yarn off to the side, and I'm going to pull out that plug, and I'm going to give it another rinse. I don't want to stick my hand in there because it is quite hot. So gloves, another really good way to protect your hands. Really thick rubber gloves to protect your hands from that boiling water. Synthropol is not the best for your skin either, so I would recommend wearing gloves when working with it as well. So I'm going to just rinse a little bit of this soap out of the sink. Put my gloves on so I can really get this yarn nice and clean. You want to try and rinse as much of that soap off the yarn before you dye it. I've grabbed 2 odd gloves. So really working that yarn. Like I said, even you have chained it up, even if you're chaining it quite loosely, it's important to make sure that that water is getting all the way into the yarn. We don't want to have any dry spots, and we don't want to have any spots where the soda ash isn't going to penetrate, and we don't want to have any spots where the water is not penetrating. So try and keep your chains as loose as you can to get rid of some of this soap, and we're going to give it a nice soak with just the hot water. There is still some soap left in that yarn, so we'll get rid of a bit more of this soap. Rinsing. Like I said, keep your water as hot as you can. That's just going to speed up the process much quicker. So with this, like a very small amount of yarn like this, you can definitely get away with doing your soaks and your soda ash soaks in a bucket, in a bowl. Try and use something that you're only going to use for weaving when you are doing a soda ash soak. It's not something that you want to be putting in your kitchen sink. So giving it a really good soak. You can see there's a bit more soap coming off, but look at that water already after that first soak. It is so much cleaner already. So giving it a really good soak. Now while this is soaking, let's mix up our soda ash and get our yarn into the soda ash bath. Okay, our yarn is still soaking in the sink. While I let it soak for just a little bit longer, I'm going to get my soda ash mixed up into my water, into my bucket. We can get our yarn then soaking in the bucket, and the next step will be moving on to mixing or picking our dyes, and then we get to do the fun part, which is dyeing. So I definitely recommend using something that is for this purpose only. Soda ash is a very caustic chemical. You're going to want to protect your hands, protect your airways, and I'm wearing a really lovely apron today to protect my clothes as well. I don't recommend mixing this up in your kitchen. I would recommend doing it either outside or in a laundry somewhere nice and ventilated, but where you're not going to worry about the workspace. So if you are doing it in the kitchen, make sure you clean it out really, really well afterwards. So the first thing that we're going to do, I'm going to put my mask on now. Actually, before I do that, I will tell you, when mixing up your soda ash solution, you're going to be mixing 1 full cup of soda ash with roughly 4 litres, 1 gallon of water. The hotter the water, the better. You really want those soda ash crystals to dissolve. You don't want to have any chunks that are going to stick to your yarn. So I'm popping my mask on now. I'm going to measure out 1 cup of our soda ash. I have a measuring cup in here that I use just for this purpose. We're doing 1 cup. Pour it into the bottom. And seal this up. And the next thing is we're going to need roughly 4 litres of hot water. I'm just using a bowl. My children took my jug that I used to use for measuring, and they have left it outside and the dogs chewed it up. So I really should get a new one. So we're going to be taking roughly 4 litres of water. Okay, so my bowl is 2 litres, so I'm going to do 2 bowls worth of hot water into our soda ash bath. Okay. 1, and while that's pouring into the bowl, I'm going to be using my spoon again to start to mix this soda ash in here. You can't really see. It's going to look quite milky, quite white. You'll know that it's all mixed in once it goes quite clear and you can see your yarn and you can see what's happening in here. Now, it might seem like there's a lot of soda ash solution in here compared to how much yarn we are actually dyeing, but the really important thing to know is that you can reuse this solution. So I have a bucket that's dedicated just for my soda ash, and you can leave it for weeks, honestly, at a time. It might start to look a little murky from putting your cotton into it and your other yarns into it, but it's going to do the same thing. If you're really unsure, you can buy some pH testing strips to check that it is still at the high enough pH for your chemical reaction to work. So I'm mixing, I hope that you can see that, mixing my soda ash. Now, like I said, this is going to be raising the pH of your yarn. So you want to make sure that you've got it all nice and mixed in. I can't feel any more soda ash in there. So my next step is taking my yarn. I'm going to wring out as much water as I can because we don't want to water down that dye bath. It's important that we're not adding too much extra water, and the yarn just goes in there. Easy peasy. Now you want to leave this for at least half an hour for the soda ash solution to completely penetrate all of that yarn. Give it a few mixes between that time. Push it down with your wooden spoon. Okay, so we have got our yarn soaking in our soda ash solution. Because we pre-soaked it, it is already wet all the way through. So this is going to suck up that soda ash water really, really, really nicely. Pushing it down with a wooden spoon just to make sure that it gets into all those little nooks and crannies of the yarn. And this is another reason why we chained it so loosely. So, like I said, we're going to want to leave this for at least half an hour. I have left this cotton in soda ash for days, honestly, and it's not going to do any harm to your yarn. So if you can't get to it straight away, it's no big deal at all. The last step of this video of preparing our yarn is we're going to want to put a lid on it, make sure nothing gets in there, it doesn't get spilt or bumped or anything. So we'll pop a lid onto our soda ash, and in the next video I'm going to show you exactly how to do the dye job that I showed you earlier that's on my loom at the moment. So feel free to subscribe below. I would love any comments about the process, anything you don't understand, feel free to drop them below and I'll answer them as best as I can.